So by the end of 2025, more than 30 million refugees were recorded worldwide, many from Asia and the Asia Pacific. Conflict, climate disasters, rising costs, and reduced aid continued to force families from their homes, making access to shelter, education, healthcare, and protection increasingly difficult. Joining us this morning, we've got Hafsar Tameesuddin, Co-Secretary General of the Asia Pacific Refugee Rights Network. Hafsar is a social worker, human rights defender, a Rohingya activist working directly with refugee and stateless communities. Her work focuses on refugee rights as well as gender equality and preventing violence against women and children. Hafsar, assalamu alaikum and welcome to Radio Islam International.
Wa alaikum salam. Thank you for having me here.
So talking about the plight of refugees, especially in the Asia Pacific, what would you say are the biggest challenges that refugees in the Asia Pacific face as we get going with the new year, 2026?
Well, the biggest challenges, 2026 is a turning point for refugees in Asia and Pacific because the pressure of food aid card and all sort of challenges are intensifying, but there are also some opportunities on the radar for change. When we talk about refugee and forced displacement in Asia and Pacific in 2016 or 2026, not 16, we are talking about one of the most protracted and under-resourced displacement contexts globally. As of 2026, we are looking at 43.7 million people in Asia and Pacific region that are in need of urgent humanitarian assistance. This region, Asian Pacific region, hosts millions of refugees, many of them in limbo for decades, without durable solution, legal protection, or meaningful inclusion. So, key challenges in 2026, most refugees in the region are stuck in limbo, as I said, for generations because many in the region do not sign 1951 Convention, and there is no refugee policies or no framework. And the massive displacement in Asia and Pacific regions, such as Afghanistan and Myanmar, after the coup in 2021, the political dynamic in both countries is very complicated. And therefore, the voluntary repatriation of this refugee, massive number of refugees from Afghanistan and from Myanmar, including Rohingyas, is not yet at the moment viable to return. Also, other parts of Pacific.
So how do the climate disasters and conflict make life even harder for displaced families in the region?
Well, in terms of the climate, Asia and Pacific is a kind of ground zero for climate-induced displacement. If you are following the news for Asia and Pacific, particularly for Bangladesh, refugees are often in the most climate vulnerable areas such as floods, cyclones, landslide, and this kind of climate change and climate vulnerability actually deepen the risks for the refugees, such as protection risks, gender-based violence, and tension with host community, because there is already social tension between local communities versus refugees, particularly in the developing countries where the local communities also are struggling with the poverty and employment, etc., and so forth.
So I'm sure there are opportunities, right, that exist for governments, for communities to better support refugees, whilst at the same time strengthening their local economies.
Exactly, and it's also depend on the political will of the countries. There are some opportunities such as refugees are. If we are looking at the refugees and forced displacement community as in dependent on aids and beneficiaries, if we are constantly feeding them without giving dignified platform where they then themselves can transform their communities, it will not be sustainable. Refugees are educators. We have to acknowledge that refugees are also entrepreneurs. Refugees are also human rights defenders, and they are also community leaders. They come with the skills and the ability to lead the causes for their own communities, and we just need to give them opportunities to do so. And refugee-led organization, we need to think about it instead of top-down approach. We need to look at the transformative approach to the localization and investing in the refugee-led communities and organization because they are more trusted, cost-effective, particularly after the funding cut in 2025. We need to look at innovative way of investing in the organizations that is cost effective, sustainable, and then informed by the ground realities. Also for the countries, if they cannot immediately think about signing of the convention refugees, they can look into social economic inclusion of refugees. Many evidence in the world, including Asia and Pacific region, shows that refugees actually contribute economically when they are allowed to work. Opportunities include skill recognition of refugees that they come with, also remote and digital work, refugee-led social enterprise, and also filling in the gap where there was the human labor need in the countries where refugees are being hosted. And for those countries who also had their own issue of dealing with the unemployment and poverty, there are some modalities that has been already proven that actually uplift both communities, that actually give the opportunities for both local and refugee communities. These are the things that we can replicate and learn from and then amplify to do that kind of work.
All right. Shukran so much for your time and for joining us, Hafsar. We really appreciate it.
You're most welcome. Thank you for having me.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Walaikum salam.
That was Hafsar